At the Woody Hayes Athletic Center here on Tuesday, Ohio State preparing to play the biggest game in the country on Saturday against a top 10 matchup with Penn State. Nathan Baird, Stephen Means from cleveland.com, or nathan.com as Jerry Emig tried to call it today. I can't wait for those royalties to come in. Ryan Day got – I should have counted how many questions he got today about Dallan Hayden. It was a bunch, and that was to be expected. You had another week where Ryan Day did not give specific updates about the health of TreVeyon Henderson, Mayan Williams, or Chip Trayanum. Just said hopefully they'll all come back. That's a very open-ended, vague thing to say, so I'm not reading a lot into that yet. We might try to find out more after practice Wednesday or as we see them later in the week. But a lot of questions about Dallan Hayden because, once again, he doesn't really have a big role, but when called upon, he achieves something. It happened last year against Maryland. It happened last year against Indiana when they were kind of back against the wall in terms of their running back depth. And he comes in and is not just good, but is very productive and is taking care of the ball and it seems to be getting the job done. What was the vibe that you came out of today as to whether, let's say, if TreVeyon Henderson is healthy, will Dallan Hayden still run the ball at some point on Saturday for Ohio State?
50-50 chance, honestly. That's not even trying to hedge. 50-50 chance, because I asked flat out, can you still redshirt this guy? A week later, can you still redshirt this guy? And they said it's not a decision they have to make right now. And he's right, because Dallan Hayden's got 2 more games before you have to decide whether or not you play him in that 5th game. Now, the thing is, if this thing goes the way Ohio State wants it to go, they're going to play 9 more games after this, so that's a lot of football. And this is a running back room now. We're on year 3 of this running back room can't stay healthy. So he said it doesn't have to be made right now. They still have some wiggle room, but they liked what they saw from him. They said every time the ball is in his hand, good things happen. But but he emphasized the fact that when the ball is in his hand, which I think if you're thinking that the problem with Dallan Hayden is him running the ball, that's not what it is. It sounds like it's pass protection.
I don't know what else to assume at this point.
That's got to be what it is he still has some development to go in pass protection. So is it so dire that it impacts Ohio State and costs it a game? We don't know that. It didn't cost him against Purdue, and it was never going to cost him against Purdue. But the one time it looked like he made a mistake, Kyle McCord just rolled out and made a good pass. It just David Johnson dropped it. So I think I want to say yes because at some point the guy who's keeping you on schedule in the running game has to play. But I also want to say no because it depends on how much Ryan Day values a running back's ability to pass pro versus everything else you're supposed to be able to do as a running back.
This is more complicated than we probably are trying to say it is in retrospect. If TreVeyon Henderson is going to play and is going to take 2/3 of your running back snaps, and then if Chip Trayanum, who has looked very good at times, was definitely beating out Dallan Hayden on a week-to-week basis. So we'll even take Mayan Williams out of this a while, which they kind of have done. He's been the number 3 running back. So if that's just the decision, then at some point it does make sense, I guess, for Dallan Hayden to bump down and to be thinking about the redshirt situation because you're just not going to get him any carries. But now I think you're also getting into a place where the question does deserve to be asked. Is the production there good enough that you really can't think about? We now have head-to-head comparisons, right? We start to get head-to-head comparisons between where Dallan Hayden is this year and where Mayan Williams is this year, where Dallan Hayden is this year and where Chip Trayanum is this year. I think it's a harder comparison with TreVeyon Henderson because the explosiveness of TreVeyon Henderson is always there in a way that we haven't quite seen from Dallan Hayden yet, but just the down-to-down, snap-to-snap production from Dallan Hayden has been there. I do, though, Ryan Day also did bring up very quickly, it's interesting sometimes to listen to questions and see how quickly they pivot to the answer that they're not going to come right out and give, but that they think is part of the answer that they want to give, which is he very quickly was like, well, the offensive line was really doing a good job of opening up holes. And I do think that's true. I think this running game did produce more holes against Purdue. I just think it is well beyond time to ask the hard question as to whether maybe Dallan Hayden sees those holes and hits those holes better than literally any other running back on this roster. And if that's the case and you have to get the ground game going, especially in a week like this against a Penn State defense that's this good, I think that he has to play. I don't know. I would play him over Chip Trayanum or Mayan Williams at this point. I just feel like the consistency that you would get from him is better than the consistency that you get from Trayanum and Williams. But it might also, the blocking scheme might affect that. If they're going to go to more of the gap blocking, the pin pull stuff that opens up some things that it seems like this offensive line is better at and more comfortable with, maybe that does open up for something for somebody other than Dallan Hayden, but he seems to see that very well. And Ryan Day keeps coming back to agreeing with the idea that vision is like the best part of Dallan Hayden's game in some ways.
I don't know how to get it. It might be situational, right? Because I agree with you. I think if you're going to have an explosive top running back in Travion Henderson, the next guy probably just needs to keep you on schedule. He doesn't have to be anything special. But it seems like the two other guys who are ahead of him might just do something a little bit more special, which is fine. But I agree. If they're going to change the scheme, maybe we just see a different Travion Henderson on Saturday. If he plays, if Chip Trayanum plays, if Miami, because that's all an if right now. What we do know is Dallan Hayden is healthy as of right now. We're recording this on a Tuesday. Now, that can change as well given the way this running back room works. But we do know he's healthy. We do know that. But if guys are healthy and those three play and you have your top three guys and they're going to change up the blocking scheme and the run plays they're going to run, then maybe none of this matters and Travion Henderson and Chip Trayanum start hitting holes and it's just like, okay, Dallan, see you next year. But if they're still going to try to run stretch run to the boundary, I think Dallan Hayden's your best option to run that play.
Here's all I know. They can't have a running game like they had against Maryland. They can't have that running game against Penn State. You can't have a running game that is 2 yards, 1 yard, 0 yards, negative yards for, what was it, like 11 of the 26 carries were 2 or fewer yards, and then another 5, I think, went for 3 yards. So you're still, like, it's if that percent, if 2/3 of your running attempts are 3 yards or fewer, you are not going to be on schedule, as you say. You are not going to be ahead of the sticks, and you are really setting Common Core in this passing game up for a lot of problems against what Ryan Day described as 2 NFL defensive ends and just a really strong Penn State defense overall. They have to, if they're going to, they have to go with whoever is going to be the most consistent player, and I think there's growing evidence. And now it's kind of like, you want to say small sample size, right? It was just 1 week against a not that great running defense from Purdue, but extend it back to last year and this is a worse Ohio State. I hate using the word worse. It's not as good of an offensive line as what they were throwing out there last year with multiple NFL guys. It's just not. So I would be a little bit surprised, frankly, at this point, depending on who is able to come back and play. Like, I would definitely say Dallan Hayden should play over Mayan Williams. Yes. Dallan Hayden, I think, would get my next carry over Chip Trayanum. And as long as it isn't one of those, like, sometimes they're in like that fullback scheme or whatever. Yeah. But if you're not using that, if you just want one running back on the field to sub in for Travion Henderson, I think it should be Dallan Hayden. Or why shouldn't the first snap be Dallan Hayden at this point?
Go check out Buckeye Talk because we're potting now. This is going to be a fun discussion on the Buckeye Talk. So go and sign up for the text, 614-350-3315, and get Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts.
And Saturday morning, when you want to know who is taking the carries, who's lining up, who's doing all that, like, it'll be coming to you at that text number from us, from cleveland.com.